Okay, continuing the discussion of arrays of objects. We have an employee class. If I create an array using this as the data type of the array, then I'm creating an array that can hold references to two employee objects. So this is what that visually looks like. Each element is empty. So if I want to put something there, it's like I bought rights to the land, but I don't have a house. I can assign each reference to an employee object. The exact same way we did this. When we've been doing employee imp before, that is declaring a reference to an employee object. And when you do this, you actually create the object using the default constructor. So I can say company 0 equals new employee, and that is a blank object. I can say company 1 equals a new employee using the parameterized constructor, and that creates an object with data in it. And so this is what that would look like. All right. So let's look at what we did over here before. So previously, I created an imp1 and I created an imp2, two individual references. Now I'm creating an array of that data type of 2. And so now I'm assigning them. So if I say company 0 equals new employee, I've just created a reference to an empty object. If I want to put data in that object, I can use the setData function to assign data to that particular employee object. The second one, I am using the parameterized constructor. To create an object with data already in it. And so the second element, element 1, is this. If I now want to print them all out, I use a for loop, the same thing you do anytime you want to do the same thing to every element of an array, you use a for loop. And inside of the array, so I equals 0, I less than company.length, the same way we did before with arrays, and I can reference company I dot get name to show you the minute I write company I dot, you see that all of the things that are available to that object become available to me. So that kind of lets you know that you're on the right track. And so this is an alternate way here that I have created the same two objects, but instead of having to separately print out employee 1 and print out employee 2, I can use a loop to print them out. So if I had 10 employees, this would be a much easier way to do this than individually named references, right? So if I want to then allow the user to input the data, then basically we need a for loop. So here I just was putting data in directly just to test it out. But if I want to allow the user to input the data, then we would set up a for loop. And we would set up a for loop to process each element of the array. And we would get the data using a scanner, store it into variables, temp name, temp hours, temp rate. And there's two methods of what we can do. I can either create the objects with the data in them directly using the parameterized constructor, which I think is the preferable, is the easier way to do it, or I can create empty objects and then use set methods to assign the data. So if I do it using parameterized constructor, for loop, ask for all the data, assign or ask for a reference to an object using this constructor, and assign that to the next object in the array. And then to print them out, so previously I showed you a for loop using I equals 0, there's also a for loop we've talked about before called a for each loop. So this is an alternate. So again, there are lots of options in terms of how you do things. So let's take a look at how to do that over here. So if I create, I've got this, so instead of assigning the data here, I want to set up a loop to assign the data. Let me just do a pause in my video so that I can do, all right, so continuing, I've written this code, so here is the array. I have variables for the user input. I have a loop to loop through each element of the array. I prompt for the data, prompt for the user data. Remember, comments are very important. Once I have the user data, I am creating an object in that element of the array using the parameterized constructor, right? And once we do that, then to print the data out, I'm using a for loop to print out a report. So again, the same for loop, and I reference the element of the array, which is an object, and then I can reference the methods to get the data from that. So we end up with something like this. I'm just putting in any old numbers just to test it out. Right? So we get all the input, and once we've gotten all the input, then we are able to generate a report that has all the data in it. Again, right now I'm only doing 2 to make my testing easier, but if I would like to then change the size of this array, the only thing that I have to change is this number here and make it work for multiple values, right? Now, one more thing I want to show. There's another type of for loop that is often quite useful, but it's only useful when you are doing output. It will not work when you are doing input. So this is our for each loop. And so I'm going to write this code using the for each loop, and that would look like this. Instead of having to reference using I just use this temporary variable E that I've created, which is an employee object, and my temporary variable E is being used to walk through each individual element of the array, and we get the exact same type of results. All right, so again, the code here is so much easier once you're using an array. Create the array, walk through it, get the data, assign it, and then to print it out, we just reference the data either with a for each loop or with an I loop, where you reference the individual elements like this, right? We'll pick up in the next video and talk about how to actually write methods and pass these objects to methods.